What if the most American foods on your table were never really American at all? What if the people who created them carried that knowledge across an ocean, in chains, and built whole cuisines from almost nothing? Their names were erased so completely, we now call their genius American. This is your table, your childhood, your holiday plate. Today we're pulling back the curtain on food you thought you knew. This episode carries more weight than usual. Stay with me. Food 1. Macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese feels so thoroughly American, it barely seems to have an origin story at all. A potluck staple, a childhood comfort food, a holiday table fixture, but the version America came to know was shaped by James Hemings, an enslaved chef trained in French cuisine, cooking in Thomas Jefferson's kitchens. Records place Hemings preparing pasta and cheese dishes at Monticello years before the recipe appeared in American cookbooks. Eventually, he negotiated his own freedom, on the condition he train a successor first. Here's the detail that stops people cold. The man behind one of America's most beloved comfort foods spent most of his life legally owned by the man he cooked for. Food 2. Peanut butter peanuts. Feel like a backyard crop, a lunchbox staple, practically a mascot of American agriculture. Yet peanuts aren't native to the American South at all. They came from South America, carried north aboard slave ships, where enslaved cooks folded them into stews and pastes long before industrial peanut butter existed. George Washington Carver gets the popular credit, and his agricultural research was real. But the underlying food tradition predates him by generations, rooted in West African and Caribbean cooking practices passed down under bondage. Here's the detail that stops people cold. The invention story we tell skips the people who actually ate it first. Food 3. Gumbo. Gumbo reads as pure Louisiana, a pot of identity, a tourist brochure dish, the taste of New Orleans. The proof, though, is sitting in the name itself. Gumbo descends from a West African word for okra, the vegetable that gives the dish its signature texture. West African cooks carried both the ingredient and the technique, blending it with indigenous and French traditions already present in the region. The word never changed. It just stopped being translated. Here's the detail that stops people cold. For 2 centuries, tourists have eaten a dish whose name is a confession, if you know what to listen for. Food 4. Carolina Gold rice feels like a side dish, an afterthought, something that just grows in the low country like it always has. But Carolina's rice empire wasn't built on Carolina knowledge. Enslaved West Africans, many from the rice coast of present-day Sierra Leone and Senegal, brought centuries of expertise in tidal flow cultivation, milling, and irrigation that planters had no idea how to execute themselves. That expertise built one of the most profitable agricultural economies in colonial America, fortunes still visible in Charleston's architecture today. Here's the detail that stops people cold. The skill was the commodity. The people who possessed it were treated as property instead. Food 5. Fried chicken. Fried chicken feels like a Sunday dinner classic, a state fair staple, comfort food with no complicated past. Its American form, though, is a fusion story hiding in plain sight. Scottish settlers brought the deep frying technique. Enslaved West African cooks brought the seasoning traditions and culinary skill that turned it into something distinct. It was often the only meat enslaved people were permitted to raise and sell for themselves. Selling fried chicken became one of the few paths to independent income under slavery. Here's the detail that stops people cold. A dish born from restriction became one of the few doors to economic freedom wealth. Food 6. Barbecue. Barbecue feels like backyard Americana. Flags, grills, county fairs, red checkered tablecloths. The word itself carries a hidden history. Barbecue likely descends from an indigenous Caribbean term for a raised wooden cooking frame, while the slow smoke, whole animal technique tied to Southern barbecue was developed and perfected by enslaved cooks, frequently assigned to pit cook for plantation gatherings and community events. Regional barbecue traditions, credited to individual pitmasters, often trace back to enslaved and later black cooks, whose names were never recorded on the recipe. Here's the detail that stops people cold. The founder of your local barbecue style may be a name history simply declined to write down. Food 7. Okra and Southern vegetable cooking. Okra feels like a niche regional vegetable, a stew thickener, a Southern quirk, nothing more. Its roots run to Africa, though, carried across the Atlantic by enslaved people who preserved it as one of the few crops that traced a direct line back home. Enslaved cooks built entire techniques around stretching scarce rations, okra, greens, and grains, into layered, flavorful dishes made from almost nothing. That resourcefulness didn't just survive, it became the backbone of Southern vegetable cooking as we know it today. Here's the detail that stops people cold. What looks like simple food was actually genius performed under starvation-level constrained food. 8. Cornbread and Hoecakes. Cornbread feels almost too plain to have a story. Flour, cornmeal, done. Hoecakes, cornbread's direct ancestor, were named for the literal garden hoe enslaved cooks, used as a griddle when no other cooking surface was available. They would heat the flat metal blade over an open fire and cook the batter directly on it, in the field, between rows of crops. That improvisation became a Southern staple, served in restaurants that never mentioned where the method came from. Here's the detail that stops people cold. The recipe's ancestor isn't a pan, it's a tool of forced labor, repurposed for survival. Food 9. Watermelon. Watermelon carries a complicated weight. Decades of racist caricature turned it into a punchline and a slur. The real history flips that entirely. Watermelon originated in Africa and was brought to America by enslaved people who cultivated, sold, and ate it. After emancipation, watermelon farming became a genuine symbol of black self-sufficiency and free enterprise, which is exactly why Reconstruction-era white supremacist propaganda twisted it into a mocking stereotype, aimed at punishing that independence. The fruit was never the joke. The joke was manufactured to attack black economic success. Here's the detail that stops people cold. The stereotype was invented as retaliation, not observation. Food 10. Sweet potato pie. Sweet potato pie feels like the quiet cousin of pumpkin pie. A holiday side note, nothing more. Enslaved cooks transformed a plain root vegetable into a dish worthy of any table, blending West African culinary techniques with what enslaved households were permitted to grow for themselves. Sweet potatoes were a staple crop long before the pie became a celebration centerpiece. It became a fixture of black family gatherings, carried forward through generations, largely unclaimed by the mainstream food world for most of American history. Here's the detail that stops people cold. That's the whole pattern of this episode, sitting in a single slice of pie. Mac and cheese, peanut butter, gumbo, rice, fried chicken, barbecue, okra, cornbread, watermelon, sweet potato pie. That's not a footnote to American food. That's the foundation of it. This isn't about taking anything away from anyone. It's about giving credit back. Look up Michael Twitty and Jessica B. Harris if you want to go deeper. Tell me, which of these did you not know?